questions people might have, things in general you want to be sure to touch base on, questions, challenges, issues you might have with goals or goal setting or anything of that sort.
I think setting the goal is probably the easy part. Probably just like maybe like different tasks to achieve that goal, or how to hold yourself accountable, or since a lot of us are all different like ages in the business, maybe like what are realistic goals per each year that we're here. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions or?
I think I have a question. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, he said, Dominic said the same thing, but like, working from home, keeping all organized, that is a little bit, challenging.
Right.
So that is kind of, I need to set goals, just, work at certain hours and then go in the kitchen, like cook and this and that, so many things when you're home. So that is kind of distracting, all the time. When I see anything work, I start doing that. So that I have to stop that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom, for me, I think even though organization and planning is probably my weakness, if people were starting it or starting over, what's a beginning point?
Okay. Okay.
I mean, for me, I think I've just heard so many conflicting ideas around setting that big goal, like dream big or make it realistic, or plan out for 20 years from now, or plan for next year. It gets overwhelming sometimes, I think, for me.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I guess, Lydia, if you want to go to that, the first screen. Sure. I think it's, talking about what we as successful agents supposedly do every day. And again, I think the one thing, and sort of it touches on a lot of what several of you have said here, is in setting, the first thing I would say is, especially in these times, this last year, maintain, like, cut yourself some slack. My wife's phrase is be kind to yourself. Cut yourself some slack, but what I would say is don't beat yourself up. As you go through the goal planning process, as you start working towards them, as you start, sort of benchmarking how you're doing compared to your goals, or holding yourself accountable to them, et cetera. If you don't meet 100% of your goals, like, don't beat yourself up, because that's just more negative energy and it's not going to serve your purpose. One of my little things that, there's a whole lot of C in my personality from my past life as a CPA before getting into real estate 28 years ago. And, back as a CPA, I used to have to, write numbers in little boxes and check them all off. And, when I do my work, my supervisor would review my work, and then they go through and what we called I-barring it. So they go like this, and just, they give me the list of, things to follow up on, or mistakes I had made in my work. And I'd have a list of, 5 things or 12 things or 20 things that I had to go back and review or edit or do whatever. And I'd go through and I'd I-bar them and cross them off. And that, that little aspect I carry through to today. If you look at my calendar, I write down, part of it is also a mind dump, stream of consciousness, get out of my head what it is that I need to do for that particular day. and I get it all down on paper. And sometimes there's like 5 things I want to get done that day. Sometimes there's 33. The first thing I do is take a deep breath and say, okay, part of the process was just getting it out of my head, my mind, getting it on paper so that I don't forget it. Some of these things are detailed menial tasks that aren't important, but I don't want to forget them. And some of them are really important things, you know, negotiate the contract to conclusion for XYZ property, you know, look at the list and then prioritize. So I'll look at the list and I'll circle the things that I absolutely want to get done that day. And the other thing is on Mondays, I'll kind of create the list, and Monday isn't necessarily everything for that day, but it's everything I want to get done for that week. So anyhow, my first comment there is, you know, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. If you don't get everything done, you know, in some schools, 90% is still an A, you know, 70% is still passing, you know, and you're progressing and moving forward. So, you know, keep that in mind. You know, the whole focus here is we want to grow our business. Obviously, you know, talking about lead generating, you know, having buyer and sellers, listings, and we want to run we still have to run the business every day. So there's all sorts of activities, but obviously what we're talking about today is number 6, setting the goals. I think, Lydia, we can probably skip the next one. And let's go to, I think, the third one, envisioning your big life. And this is what you do have to, I think, you know, Gary will say, start with the end in mind. You know, and as you said, there's probably folks on the call and certainly folks in our market center who have a myriad of different goals in real estate. You know, for someone, it may be, hey, I just want to make $30,000 so I can pay my kids' college tuition. For others, it's like, I need to support a family of 5. You know, how is that going to work? So, you know, you have to sort of envision, you know, what is your purpose for being in this business? And then, you know, as it says, envisioning your big life. Back in the day, in the early 2000s, when I was going to the very small group masterminds with Gary Keller, when, you know, masterminds were 20, 25 of us in the room with Gary, one of our fellow agents, you know, sort of questioned and said, well, Gary, you know, this whole millionaire agent thing, you know, I don't need $1 million. If I have $200,000, it's more than I need to live on, you know, and put money away for savings, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so why do I have to think about that? One of the things he said to him is, well, but if you could, what else would you do with the extra $800,000? You know, and this lady's eyes got real big. And she said, well, you know, I'd probably donate a lot of it or whatever. So it's, you know, think about, you know, you know, start with the really absurd. If you won the Powerball or the Mega Millions this week, you know, $500, $600 million, you know, obviously, what would you do with that? I mean, that's kind of crazy. But now bring it down to, you know, if you were able to accomplish everything that you wanted to accomplish, start thinking about what would those things be. You know, is it, you know, setting aside investments so that you can live off your investments, at whether that's 10 years down the road or 35 years down the road. Do you want to, you know, fund kids' education? You know, do you want to buy a new car and brand new car for cash in 3 years? So think about, you know, if money were no objection, what kind of life would you like to have and what kind of things might you want to have and what causes might you want to support, et cetera. And then begin to quantify what does that look like. You know, if you want to buy a new car for cash for $35,000 3 years from now, kind of jot that down. So we can go to the next slide. I think it's a quote, I think, from Gary Keller saying who we are and where we want to go determine what we do and what we accomplish. So the theory behind that is, I think, having the goal out there, whether it's a year down the road or 3 years down the road or 5, or retirement in 30 years, keeping an eye on that big future goal helps pull you through, you know. So, you know, think about it in a tug of war, if you will. When you want to accomplish a goal, you know, if there are forces opposite you pulling you and you're just standing there, you're going to go a lot further than if there are people pushing behind you. So, you know, so keep that in mind, that if I have these goals out there and if I'm reviewing them and if I'm thinking about how I can adjust course, aiming towards them, then I can, you know, I'll get there more quickly. All right. And it's, you know, his quote, he talks about, you know, where we want to go and knowing what to do. So it's talking about thinking and acting and how to accomplish things. So Lydia, if we can go to the next slide. You know, it's the chart of thinking versus time and effort. You know, if you do no thinking or planning and you don't spend any time and effort on it, you know, you're going to stay in the very bottom left corner of the box. If, you know, and what he's saying in the one thing is also the blue line, if it, yeah, I think it's blue, that you can spend a lot of time and effort on things. But if you're not really thinking and planning, the activities will not end up with as great a result as you will get if you're putting both efforts out there. You know, if you're thinking and planning and focusing and reviewing and spending the time and effort on it, then you're going to have much larger outcomes. I mean, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, okay.
Absolutely.
I guess now flip to the next screen, if you will, Lydia. What they're showing in that one, oops, oh, there we go. I was gonna say, yours isn't the same as mine. What they're showing that one then is how big is your box? Because, you know, that's sort of the potential. And the other thing I think he's trying to show there is that it grows exponentially. If you go along the horizontal, the bottom axis of time and effort, you see that between the blue line and the red line, you sort of just did twice as much time and effort. So you doubled the time and effort. You know, but your results, you know, if you took small actions, you know, your results improved a little bit. But with the larger thinking, you know, and thinking doesn't take all that much time or effort, but with the larger thinking and the actions, you'll see that the double of your time and effort, the box that you have available to you is probably 10 times larger than the box that you have with very little thinking. You know, so that's in essence what he's trying to convey there, that there is a much greater impact available to your income, your business and your income, if you put a little more time into the planning, the thinking, And so much of that then is goal setting. So the next slide, Lydia, please. All right, so this gets back to, you know, what I alluded to, which is thinking about your big life. You know, what are, you know, this example, you know, donate $5,000 to a cat habitat, you know, get through school debt-free, 120,000. And let me tell you, with the 3 kids who at this point are done with school, that 120 is kind of on the low side, unless they get big scholarships. But you know, paying off a mortgage for parents, 18,000, it looks like that number was. But so that's, you know, and the other thing you need to do is also, you know, look at your household family budget. You know, what is it that you want and need to live on? Or eliminate that word want and leave, because those are negative and weak. What is it that you desire, you know, to earn? What is it, you know, for the lifestyle you desire to have? What are your expenditures going to be? Don't forget that you have to pay taxes, so you're going to have to bump up, you know, so one of your boxes here should be, you know, what it is I need to live my life. So if you want to flip to the next one. So the first part there, obviously envisioning, is, you know, figuring out what it is you want in those boxes: the car, the education, the donations, the charities, the retirement, the investment properties. I would throw that out there. And, you know, for me, that was a huge motivator. Even I started investing in real estate before I actually got into real estate, and then kind of realized what a good path it was. And, you know, and this kind of goes back to don't beat yourself up. And if the biggest plans you set for yourself, I guess the other comment I'd say is, if you set your goals large enough, even if you don't accomplish everything that you thought you might want to do, you might still end up having a pretty awesome life. And by way of example there, back in the day, you know, 20 years ago, in writing The Millionaire Agent, Gary Keller asked our small group mastermind folks to, you know, envision how you could have this really huge life. And he asked us to envision what would it take to, you know, gross $1 million, to net $1 million in our business, and then to have a passive income of $1 million coming in, et cetera, et cetera. As part of that exercise, one of the things I did, I mean, we had several small investment properties. One of them had a very large capital gain available. And doing that exercise got me thinking to, oh, I should sell that property and do a 1031 exchange and leverage it into a larger or more investment properties, thereby allowing myself to expand the number of units, the income from those rental units, and the potential for passive income down the road. And part of my exercise, I then said, oh, I'll do that with each of these other properties we have. And I had this very large, grandiose picture, which, if it had all played out, you know, I mean, if in fact we had followed through on everything, our life would have been a little crazy. One of the things my wife said was, look, you know, I can manage the 12 rental units we have in Wicker Park and Bucktown while we're living here. But if you start buying, you know, if you want to start buying many more units, you know, someone else has to do it. Life is going to get complicated, et cetera, et cetera. Well, with that, what Steve Schlater calls a BHAG, B-H-A-G, big, hairy, audacious goal, we actually started implementing it. So we did decide, and in 2003, I think it was, no, 2001, we did sell that one investment property. And we went ahead, and so we sold a 5-unit property and we bought 3 other properties that had 12 units, 8 units, and 4 units. Fast forward 19 years later, we still have the 4-unit and the 12-unit. Ultimately, that 8-unit got traded into another 8-unit and now into a 10-unit. And, you know, and my wife and I kind of had a compromise because at the time we had 3 little kids, you know, grade school, paying for Catholic education, knowing there'd be college down the road, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We did not follow through. And I focused on my sales business. I did not follow through on trying to leverage the other properties we had into bigger and more units and everything else. And at the time, shortly thereafter, I also helped launch a new market center, et cetera, et cetera. But that one step and that one action I took towards the big, hairy, audacious goal, if you will, has served us well, because that one transaction, you know, following through on that one sale leaves us now with these 26 rental apartments that ultimately are going to be a huge portion of our retirement plan, and, you know, passive income, you know, coming to us starting, you know, in about 5 years is our current goal. But if I hadn't really dug into that big, hairy, audacious goal setting in 2000, 2001, that, you know, it might not have come to fruition. So don't be afraid of doing that. And I kind of relay that story to convey that, again, even if everything about your goal setting doesn't come to fruition, in that case, you know, that was just like 1/3, because we only sold one of the 3 properties we had at the time, et cetera, you know, for doing a 1031 exchange. So don't be afraid to set the big ones, and then don't be upset with yourself if only a portion of it comes through, because it can still lead, if you've set big enough goals in the beginning, what you end up with, you know, may still be pretty awesome. So understanding your goal, if you want to flip to the next screen, Lydia, you know, where's it go? You know, obviously they're saying the dollars you earn, you know, a portion of the commission goes to another agent, a portion gets paid to the market center as part of your cap and royalty. You have your business expenses, and then you have your take home money. And that's where they say parenthetically, let's not forget about your taxes. So if you want to flip to the next screen, you sort of have to reduce down to, you know, what is it that you're going to make on your typical transaction? So, you know, in this scenario, a $300,000 sale, average commission is going to be at 3%, is $9,000. You know, if your goal, you know, you have to be careful not to say, oh, well, my goal is to make $90,000, so I need to sell 10 properties. Well, but if it's 90,000 take home pay, you know, then you might need 110 or 120,000 or whatever. Let's maybe flip to the next screen. In this example, they go through market center company dollars. So it's, you know, 27,000 for this particular market center in the example. The franchise royalty of 3,000. So it totals $30,000. If you want to flip to the next screen, Lydia, then we're talking about, okay, if your net income goal is 100,000 and you have to pay $30,000 for your company dollar, and then your business expenses are going to be 50,000, then your total GCI is 180. So divide that by what your average commission is on a transaction. In that example of 300,000 with a 3% commission, it's $9,000. So in this hypothetical, this agent has to do 20 transactions to meet this, next year income goal. So here I sort of make a sidebar and say, so that's one exercise I think everyone needs to do. If you've been in the business, go back and look at your transactions over the last year or the last 3 years or whatever. You'll need to identify what your average sale price was. Identify, and you might do that both by buyers and sellers, because you might be selling homes in a less expensive neighborhood and then having buyers buy in a more expensive neighborhood. You might, they might be the similar numbers. I mean, for years, mine was about $50,000 difference in average sale price between buyers and sellers. And then also look at what is the gross commission that Keller Williams gets on those transactions that you did. So not just your split, not just your checks, but what the gross commission amount was. So if you sold, another company's listing to your buyer for $100,000, if the co-op commission was 3%, obviously you're getting $3,000. But some of the buyer transactions might only be 2.5% minus $295. Well, then you're getting, you're getting 2.5% minus the 295. So you're only getting $2,205. So on that transaction, you're actually, on that buyer transaction, you're only getting 2.2%. So looking at your business, both the buyer side and the seller side, is kind of important because, and I know in my instance, my average commission on my listings was much higher than my average commission percentage on my buyers, because so many buyers agent or so many listing agents out there offer a co-op to buyers agents of 2.5% minus X dollars. So a lot of times on the buying side, my average commission was just under 2.5%. But whether you're taking a 5% or 6%, 7% listing, that's all up to you. And another one of the reasons why we focus on listings is because you're also in control, a little more control of your income. If you take a 6% commission, you can offer 2.5% and keep 3.5%. Or, if you have a 5% commission, you can offer 2.5% minus $295. Well, you're actually then going to earn a little over 2.5% on that particular deal. So you need to know what your average percentages are on the deals you're doing, and ultimately know the average dollar amount that you're earning from each kind of transaction, whether it be a buyer or listing. And then keep in mind, one of the goals that you might want to set for yourself is to increase the average sale price, whether it be your buyers or sellers. So, in some instances, it's focusing on a different geographic area or a different suburb or whatever, for listings that might have a higher dollar volume. If your average transaction is, $200,000, well, you can double your earnings if you do the same number of transactions in a market where the average sale price is 400,000. And you can do it with the same number of transactions, but if the dollar amount is double, then, your income can double. Commission-wise, it's not as easy to double your commission, but you can certainly have an impact You know, if you've historically been asking for 5% commissions, if you ask for a 6% commission, if you still offer 2.5%, well, you're going to take home 3.5% instead of 2.5%. And that's a 40% increase in your earnings, meaning that you and Keller Williams would be keeping 3.5% as opposed to 2.5%. So, you know, think about it that way as you're setting up your goals, you know, because it can be a combination of things. You know, you don't have to do twice as many transactions necessarily to make twice as much money if in fact that's part of your goal setting, you know, that you want to increase your income so much. So all right, Lydia, if you want to flip to the next screen, I will offer I will offer the big apology and confession, if you will. Lydia knows this. I am not up to speed in command. For those of you who have joined more recently, you are in an awesome place. You know, I've looked at it. I think it probably does make it easier to do your calculations. You know, for me, my past life as a CPA, you know, I like playing with numbers and I do calculations on paper, and I'm still kind of old school in that respect. But KW offers us the tools and, you know, instantly does the calculations, et cetera. And I would say, meet with Lydia if you have questions or whatever about command, because I can't answer any of those.
Can I chime in just a little bit on this part?
Yes, absolutely, Lydia. I'll take a drink of coffee while you do that.
Yeah. So when you log into command, there's going to be at the bar a bar at the very top that says set your 2021 goals. So everything that Tom is just talking about, figuring out your average and all average commission and all of that, or buy side, list side, like there's a calculator in command which does it all for you. And then you can look at what your activities should be based on what your goal is. So for example, if you have a goal of a gross commission income of $80,000 in the year, command's going to tell you, okay, in order to do that throughout the whole year of 2020, you should have, and this is just an example, you should have, you know, 3,000 leads going into command. And of those 3,000 leads per month, go on X amount of appointments. So let's say it says go on 62 appointments. And then of those 62 appointments throughout the whole year, as long as you get 25 under contract, then you're going to reach your goal. So again, these are just example numbers, but it all does break down within command. And every time that you create an opportunity, when you're you turn in things into the office, this goal tracker does take into account the opportunity that you're putting in. That's why it asks you, what are you in? Are you just cultivating this? Do you have an appointment set? Is it scheduled? That's why when you set up the opportunity, it asks you those questions. So command is paying attention to that. So if you track every opportunity that you have in real life, like even if it's just a lead that says that they're not currently ready to list their house now, they will be in August of this year, you could put that into your opportunities and it'll take that into account as part of your goal. So there is a goal, that goal calculator will walk you through everything, and it has a ton of information in it as you're setting it up. So if you guys wanted to do a one-on-one and figure out how you could set your goals, feel free. We also did a class in November that is recorded and is in our Facebook group. If you want to go and watch that, but just go and check it out and ask questions. Feel free to message me, email me, text me, and figure out how you can do that in command, because it's going to help you a whole lot to see the bigger picture of what your goal is for what you want to earn.
Awesome. All right. Well, and the other thing too, like, again, you know, I punch numbers in a calculator and have fun doing it, my sick CPA life. But as Lydia says, the KW command, goal setting, et cetera, for those of you who don't like numbers, you can just plug a few things in and it'll constantly recalculate for you. And that's where you'll find it's kind of amazing if you're changing an average sale price or an average commission or whatever, you can instantly see how it can impact your numbers and your net income, and how close you might get to your goal by changing a little bit of focus here or there. So all right, so the next screen, then we're kind of shifting from understanding your goals and kind of coming up with the numbers that you need and talking about doing the right activities. And if you want to flip to the next one, Lydia. So back hundreds of years ago, or at least in the 1800s, I forget, there was the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto, and in math and behavioral sciences, it's called the Pareto's Law. But since the 1940s or so, when behavioral scientists kind of started looking at things, they refer to it more simply as the 80-20 principle. Back in the time of Pareto in Italy, he studied and did research and realized that 80% of the wealth of the country was held by 20% of the people. Quite candidly, I would say by today's standards and the internet and different ways of generating income, without being political, et cetera, I would say 80% of the world or 80% of the country's wealth is probably held by a lot smaller percentage than 20% of the population. But the gist of this was also determining that you get 80% of your results by 20% of the effort that you put out. So a lot of, some people say, you've heard the phrase just showing up, and just starting is part of the process. So the screen also says that it says the big rocks. Does anyone have any idea what we mean by big rocks?
The big rocks are the most important things you have to do that day and the most successful things you have to do that day. So those are the things that you focus on first. Right.
And a nice visual example that Gary gave us back in the day was, he had a stack of rocks, a stack of like marble pebbles, like marble sized pebbles, and then some sand and like a third of a glass of water. And he was sort of like, can all these things fit into, and then he had like a glass, and it was like, you look at it and physically think it can't all get in there. But the way to make all of that work is putting in the large stuff first, and then the small pebbles will filter around it. And then the sand, which are the little ministerial acts, will filter around the small pebbles and the big rocks. And then the water that you pour in just kind of seeps all the way through. So, keep that in mind. If you've seen a foundation going in or whatever, when they backfill a foundation, they put in, big chunks of rocks, et cetera, then they put in the gravel, then they back in the sand or whatever, and then or dirt, and then they top dress it, et cetera. So, back to that comment, it's the big rocks, it's the important things, and you ultimately know what that's going to be. It's lead generation. And back to Gary's book, From the One Thing, it's what's the one thing that I can do today that will have the biggest impact on my business or on what I achieve today, et cetera, et cetera. So, as you're And the other thing to keep in mind is the planning and the goal setting is and should be part of your 80%. I think sometimes that's not mentioned enough. And it again, it doesn't have to be a lot of time. We'll get into it when we hit the page with the 411, but once you actually sit down for maybe a couple hours over a couple of days, if you haven't done this already, to kind of consider your big goals, for this year, 3 years, 5 years, retirement, 30 years down the road. Once you sit down and kind of have a picture of what that looks like, and then do what we talked about previously, kind of quantifying dollar-wise what you're going to need to accomplish that, and then you put it into some actionable items over the next 3 years, for this year, et cetera, then part of your 80% part of your 20% of activities and effort that's going to help give you those results is to review your goals on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. And we'll talk about that. So just keep in mind that goal setting and reviewing your goals is part of your 20% effort. It shouldn't be 20% of your time at all. But again, back to some of those original slides that showed those boxes increasing, a little bit more time each day or each week looking at your goals and your plans will help exponentially with, results being 80%. So lead generation with buyers and sellers, obviously. If you want to flip to the next screen, Lydia, sorry. Oh, they threw in what's the one thing you can do right now that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? So I kind of paraphrase that by saying, what's the one thing that you can do right now or get accomplished today that will move your business along? I mean, so as you're thinking about that list, it's not necessarily the thing that has to get done today, but it's the one thing that's going to have the biggest impact. And do that first, because if there's something that has to get done today, like faxing a contract to an attorney, you can do that at 4 o'clock, but if there's some piece of lead generation that is going to get you a listing or get you an appointment for a listing, that is more important towards accomplishing your goals. And that's the first thing that you should do. All right. So now if you want to hit the next slide, this is where, again, lead generation, buyers and sellers. And I would say, emphasize on the sellers because you can always get, more buyers from your listings. And again, what I said before, you're a little more in control of your income stream by having those listings. So grow your business, focus on that. And now flip to the next one. And this is actually one of my favorite parts of the goal setting. And that's the 411. I don't know. Can I just ask, has everyone heard of a 411? Is there anyone who hasn't heard of it? What's the level of knowledge about a 411?
Yes, I've heard of it before and I've done it.
Okay.
I've just started using it.
You have. Okay, good. All right. Well, the concept behind a 411 is that 4 weeks of activities help you accomplish your 1 month goal, which helps you accomplish your 1 year goal. So that's where the 411 comes from. The nice benefit of this is, if you think about it, focusing on 4 weeks of a month for 12 months, theoretically, if you accomplish—
Hey, Keith, how's it going?
I'm sorry?
What happened with the other house we put the contract on?
Oops.
I was just gonna email you, bro. They accept.
Okay. So if you think about it, if you accomplish everything you need, everything you set out to do in your 4 weeks, and you hit your monthly goals, you're only going to be working 48 weeks out of a 52-week year. So you've automatically built in 4 weeks of vacation. So, but with the 411, then you basically start at the top level, which is your annual goals. The one thing this form doesn't show that the early iterations of it did was it sort of broke the 411 form into personal goals, financial goals, and business goals. So where you had and it was a way to sort of integrate your whole life. The personal goals were dealing with things such as, health, nutrition, family, exercise, possibly time, volunteered to charity or not-for-profit work or whatever. People would say, under their personal goals, I want to have, 3 one-week vacations with my family. It might be, I want to read 20 books this year. I want to exercise, 3 days a week for 52 weeks, so that's 156, aerobic exercises or whatever. So you can set up some personal goals because, it's not all about business, Then your financial goals are really just about, what is the income you need to make and so forth. Maybe your gross, like in that example we had earlier in the slides, you want GCI, gross commission income of 180,000. You want to have net income of 100,000. You want to have 20 transactions. So that's keeping you focused on sort of the 3 major metrics of your business plan. Excuse me 1 second. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. And so you have those metrics out there. And then the business goals, if you have a real estate team beyond just your individual self, so back in the day when I had a larger team, my financial goal was the number of transactions and the income, et cetera, that I personally wanted to generate. And then I had business goals for what my entire team was aiming to do in terms of number of transactions. So I had buyer's agents, and so I factored in the number of buyer transactions that the additional team members would do, et cetera. I also would put down under business goals any other businesses that you're involved in. If you have some other business, for me, it was my rental real estate as well. And when I had ownership in market centers, I had, business goals related to market centers. So, and I would suggest thinking about that for everyone, because it's especially the investment real estate. Interest rates are super low right now. And investment properties, there's, when you think about it, there's very little in the way of investments, et cetera, that you can leverage the way you can leverage real estate. Whether you're buying a home for yourself, which obviously can be done with a much smaller down payment, or if you're buying investment property and a lender requires you to have 20% down, think about it. If the property appreciates 1%, you've leveraged it 5 to 1 by only putting 20% down. So if a property goes up 1%, you've actually created a 5% gain on your original investment. So sidebar, that's one of the reasons why investment real estate can be so attractive. And in the business we're in, we potentially get to see opportunities, that other people aren't looking at or focused on. So think in terms of your business as well. If you're early in your career and you're not there yet and you just want to get your feet wet, and get successful in real estate for a year or two before you start branching out, that is fine too, because you want to be really, really focused. And ultimately your real estate sales business, if it is your primary source of income, is going to be the fuel that generates your other potential investment opportunities. So your 411 may just have two branches, if you will, one being personal and one being your financial / business or whatever. So you start with this form, and so on the top level, you'll want to list 4 or 5 or 6 goals that are personal and goals that tie into your financial plan that you created earlier, where under this example, I need 180,000 of GCI, 100,000 net. It's going to come from 20 transactions, and maybe then that you have to go on 60 listing appointments in order to make that happen. Okay. You write that out at the annual level and then make 12 copies of this form. Then you label them January through December at the monthly level. And then break down, what is it that I need to do in January and accomplish in January? What's my goal to accomplish in January? Well, you might want to front load things because, spring and summer tends to be a busier time. So if you need to go on 50 listing appointments to accomplish that goal of 100,000 net, you might want to say, 50 divided by 12 months is about 4 per month, a little over 4. But if you go on 4 listing appointments in December and you're relying on that to create income, that's not going to happen. Remember, your 4 listing appointments in December may result in listings that you sign in December, but they're not going to go to contract and close in 2021. So keep in mind that the 50 listing appointments in this hypothetical situation may all have to be done in the first 8 months of the year to give some of those listings you take in August time to be shown, go under contract and close this year. So keep that kind of stuff in mind. So if it's 50 listing appointments divided by 8 months, then that's 6 a month. Well, you might set as a target going on 7 in January, February, March, April, and then maybe 6 in May, June, July, and August. Okay. So for each of the targets that you were setting at your annual goal, you want to have a monthly goal associated with it. So if it was go on 50 listing appointments, then in January, you want to have how many listing appointments you want to go on. And February, you want to have the number of listing appointments. Under your personal side, if you said you wanted to read 20 books this year, well, 20 books is something that can be easily divided over all 12 months because you can read every single month. So you may just say that you want to read 1 book in January and 2 books in February, or complete 2 books in February, complete 1 more book in March. Under your personal, you wanted to exercise 3 times a week. How many weeks are there in January? If there's 4 weeks, you want to exercise 12 times. And then set the targets also that you want to, if your goal was um, $6 million of sales, you may then want to say that you want to have $800,000 under contract in January. And, so break down the monthly goals. So the annual and the monthly goals are like targets that you're aiming for and you're going to be measuring yourself by. And then and you complete all 12 of those sheets, because you want to map out what every month is going to look like right now. If you haven't done a 411, that would be something you'd work on this week. So you'll have 12 sheets. And what I did candidly is I 3-hole punched them and put them in a spiral notebook. Then, I talked about, investing some time in the planning and the goal setting. The best suggestion we typically had during our masterminds was, for most people, Sunday tends to be, a slower, more relaxing day. It's also, before you might have an open house or something like that. But, Sunday evening, you're decompressing, et cetera, and you've got a whole week of opportunity coming before you. My best suggestion, and I will tell you the best results I got back in, 2002, 3, 4, when I had sort of the most going on in my life during that period, I had 3 relatively young kids under the age of 10. I was launching a new market center. Ironically, during that time, my sister was also dying from brain cancer. And I had started adding people and had buyer's agents on my team, et cetera. And that was the time when I was most focused to this. And I just sat down, no matter what was happening, I sat down for half an hour to an hour on Sunday night. Every time you look at it, look at your annual goals, look at the goals for that month, and then think about what is it that has to be accomplished that week to move yourself along. So again, we talked about it might be 8 listing appointments for the month. Well, you're sitting down on a Sunday night, you're looking at how many have I already done this month? Well, if I've already done 4, well, I'm in good shape because we got about half the month left. And so your goal for this next week might be 2 more listing appointments. Or you might know that you're going to be out of town for a part of a week. So maybe you want to do 3 in the 3rd week, and then you only have to do 1 in the 4th week. So, sit down Sunday night and think about what is it that I'm going to do this coming week. And under the weekly category, those are really activities that are going to help you meet your target. So it's, you can still put schedule 2 listing appointments, but you also want to put down the activities, whether it's, call 20 people a day, or what is it that you're going to be doing to accomplish those. If you're sending out a mailer, if you're, going door knocking or meeting in person with people, or you're adding people to your database because that with your internet marketing, that will result in more potential leads. So you put your daily activities in there, or your what you want to accomplish for the week. And then on Sunday night, take a look at what you want to do for the week, look at your calendar for the week, and maybe you already know certain listing appointments you're going to have. Block things in and then block out your time in your calendar. Then typically, Friday afternoon or whatever, go back, look at the week and check off. Have I accomplished what I set out to accomplish for this week? Because if you have, and you've kind of done an accurate job setting up your numbers at the beginning, then you are going to be moving yourself towards the goals that you wanted to accomplish. If you want to flip the screen, Lydia, the next one says, don't lose focus. Remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. So again, that goes back to, and some of the top producers in the company will say they actually look at their 411 daily. Some say they look at it 3 times a day. But when they're doing that daily refresh, they're looking at sort of the annual big, hot, hairy, audacious goals, because that's kind of your big why. That's, again, to that analogy, that's what's going to be pulling you through the year to accomplish what it is you want to accomplish. And I will tell you, back, my highest year of production was a little over 28 million in 2003. And that year, I probably completely filled out my weekly 411 and focused on it, those Sunday nights, and then, working through it daily. I probably was still only on top of it 42 to 45 weeks of the year. As I said, that was a year my sister was diagnosed, and we also had a 2-week vacation in Ireland. It was a tough year, but having, even with, call it 80 to 85% focus, I had a great year, production wise, et cetera, for the business. So, try not to lose focus, and, and it's easy, even if you've missed it for a week or two, you still have those annuals, you still have those monthlies that you can go back to. So if you want to flip to the next screen, Gary says, in the one thing that accountable people achieve results others can only dream of. And again, that's going back to, look at those goals, adjust. And the other thing I don't think they have in the materials here that Gary always stressed in our masterminds is that so many people set goals for a year and then don't look at them. Or in the corporate world, for those of you who are in the corporate world, how often would you get a performance evaluation? I mean, the most I ever had was when I was an auditor at Price Waterhouse, starting right out of college. We got a performance review after every client assignment. They told us how we did. They rated us, 1 to 5 in a bunch of different categories. And you had that evaluation with your supervising senior, or when you were a senior with your supervising manager. I probably only had, in any given year, 6 to 8 client assignments. So I was evaluated and I got written performance reviews 6 or 8 times during the year. In most of corporate America, you might get a quarterly review probably every 6 months, but in many cases, if you get formally reviewed, it might only be once a year. And if you're not doing the job the way your boss wants you to do it, or you're not achieving the results that your employer wants, you get very limited opportunity to course correct. Selling real estate, we're all independent contractors. We're our own boss, and we're accountable primarily to ourselves, our family, et cetera. The beauty of the 411 and setting goals and utilizing the 411 is that you'll be reviewing yourself monthly. So you'll have 12 performance reviews a year, but not only that, you then break it down and you're doing it every week. So it is so much easier to course correct, when you're looking at it on a weekly basis. I mean, you might be out there, you might set your goals to have that average sale price that's twice as high as what you had last year. And maybe you're marketing into a neighborhood or a suburb that's different from what you've done in the past. And maybe after a month and a half, you know, you're 6 weeks or 8 weeks into it, and you realize you're not getting the listings, you're not getting, you know, you're not getting transactions. Well, you know, maybe for some reason there's not a connect with that area or those listings or whatever. And, you know, maybe there's something you can change about your marketing to break through to that area. Or maybe it's like, okay, that it's not going to happen right now. And then you might course correct and let me go back, you know, to the area that I was working before. Or better yet, don't necessarily, if you're successful in one area, don't necessarily leave that, just branch out into another area. But if you find out that that more expensive neighborhood's not working for you, then maybe you double down your efforts in the area that has been successful. But you might not have that realization if you're not reviewing your activities and your results and, you know, versus your targets on the weekly and monthly basis. So I will just say that reviewing with the, breaking it down into the 411 and then reviewing it on a regular basis will pull you through and help you hit those goals. Any questions? Any ahas? I think I touched on most of the questions that people had, but.
I think you did a great job presenting and provided valuable information, starting with be kind to yourself, reminding us to participate in the business that we're in by investing, and really helping us to see clearly the tools that are in place to help us launch and relaunch our businesses. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to agree with her. It was really like specific and to the point, and you didn't just give like general topics or anything like that. You went into depth on the details.
Sure. Yeah, I will tell you back, and I don't know if it's still the case or not, but you know, back in the day, 15, 20 years ago, I mean, Gary and Keller Williams in general, I mean, they would teach a 4-hour class on doing the 411. You know, sometimes they do a whole day, and you know, so that people actually left the class with 411 done for the year. And
I feel like I need that class.
yeah, I mean, it's a good one. You know, you know, as I said, it can pull you through, you know, and wake you up and everything else. But it's also can be very satisfying. And again, being kind to yourself when you look back and it's like, well, you know, I set this crazy goal that I never thought I'd accomplish, and I'm 80% of the way there, you know, or I accomplished 80% of what I set out for. And, you know, maybe you know, if my income was 50,000 last year and I wanted to net 100,000 this year, well, maybe I didn't net 100,000, but I net 80, and that's still 60% better than last year, you know. So, you know, and that's the other thing is celebrate the successes. You know, it's, again, part of being kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up for the 3 things you didn't get done on your list. Celebrate the 7 things that you did accomplish. And if one of those 3 things is really important to do, just tell yourself, I'll get it done tomorrow, or it's going to be finished next, you know, that marketing piece is going to be finished next week and I'm going to get it out on Monday, you know, by 3 o'clock, you know, and then make it a priority. So.
I just want to say this was really great, Tom. I appreciate it. The way you broke down the 411, I'm going to go back and I know I said I just started using it, but I'm definitely going to go back and revisit how I'm using it. just a couple things.
Sure.
One, I'm a single mom, so I have a long to-do list, and one suggestion that was given in one of the other trainings was to write those to-dos on the back of the 411. So they're there, but they're out of your mind. I love that. And another, do you suggest? I'm laughing because do you suggest writing this in pencil, or how do you handle adjustments? I'm thinking I want to put my goals in pen because then it's real and it's there. But life happens, and you have to make adjustments as you go. So how do you suggest handling those?
Right. Well, remember what I said, your annual gets written at the top and photocopied. So it doesn't matter whether it's in pencil or pen, because it's just a photocopy for the next, it's on there. It's your annual goal for the whole 12 months.
I love that, by the way.
Yeah, normally, normally we say write the monthlies in pen. I for the most part, the 411 should be in pen, because, and again, I didn't mention it, but maybe a part of your Sunday night weekly ritual, if you will, is, again, whether it's your Friday or your Sunday, you might look at it Friday afternoon and say, okay, how'd I do with what I set out to do this week? Because that gives you the chance, like, oh, maybe if there's a thing or two that you didn't get done, you might be able to wrap it up on Saturday or Sunday. And then when you review on Sunday night, what am I going to do this next week? Of course, part of it is you got to look back and say, oh, did I go on my 2 listing appointments? Did I talk to 20 people? Did I add 20 people to my database? And there you have it in pen, but, if you said, add 20 people to the database, you're going to want to put in there parenthetically or whatever, okay, 17, or I got 25, so, put down what actually happened. And because that way, that can be part of your adjusting going forward. Maybe you only went on 1 listing appointment, so you're going to try and go on 3 this next week. But you talk to, 25 people and you got all 25 in your database. So, maybe you're following up on past leads to try and get those listing appointments, and you only have to talk to 15 people, this week or whatever. So it gives you that chance to sort of adjust on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Tom. I really can relate to you. Probably most people in the office know I'm not great with technology too, and I do use a lot of pen and paper, but when you really come down to it, what you're doing each day, whether you have technology or not, is just doing it. And I know for me, I get caught up in this technology and learning it, and then all of a sudden my day is gone. So
Yeah.
I think the most important thing, however you do it, are those goals and what you're doing each week, each day. And I'm a visual learner, so seeing it on paper and putting it in front of me really helps me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and to that, Jane, I'd say also, in spite of all the technology, all the technology that we have now are simply tools. I would portend that, real estate is still a person-to-person business. The number of transactions that you'll do in your life, or that we're doing, that is strictly, online or whatever, that's going to be few and far between. People, technology's been wonderful in terms of the tools. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it results in fewer people at open houses these days. I built my business, 28 years ago by doing open houses for other agents who had listings until I got my own listings. And then I do an open house every single week on one of my listings because people would come and I'd get to talk to them. And, you know, if I could convey to them that I was a likable person who was also competent, then, you know, if they had a need and they didn't have an agent, I had a pretty good chance of picking up a buyer client. And, you know, for the first 4 years of my 4 years, when I was just kind of focusing that way, 75% of my business was buyers. And I would bet more than half of that was people I met at open houses. But technology with, you know, 25 to 50 photos of a listing, you know, means that people don't have to go to open houses anymore. They can see every corner of the condo or the house or the, you know, the property online. But when push comes to shove, you know, there still has to be, you know, a confidence and a comfort factor in the person that you're working with as your real estate agent. You know, there'll be some clients who think that they have all the information they need online and that they're just as smart as we are. And, you know, they can analyze pricing and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, they don't really need us, et cetera. But, you know, I think the business is still going to be a person-to-person business. So.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions or?
Can I ask a question, Tom?
Sure.
You, first of all, are amazing. I learned so much. I've been meaning to take your classes every night and I never get to do it for some, I don't know why. Anyway, it's so much stuck to me, the 80-20, you know, implementing it with your team. I didn't even think of that. My question was the 20% down when you did investments, you made a statement that said, you put 20% down and the real estate goes up by 1%, you get 5% return, was it?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. If you want to simple numbers, jot it down. So say if there's $100,000 property and you want to buy that as an investment. And if you evil mortgage lenders out there require us to put 20% down, because, you know, I'd rather put less. So if you put 20% down, 20% of 100,000 is $20,000.
Okay.
Okay. And you get a mortgage from a wonderful mortgage broker for $80,000. Okay. Now, if real estate next year only appreciates by 1%, right? Your property then appreciates from a $100,000 value to a $101,000 value, right?
Yes.
So you gained $1,000 in value, right?
Yes.
What was your investment? Forget commissions, closing costs, and all that stuff. But your investment was your $20,000 down payment. Right? Your $1,000 gain divided by your $20,000 down payment equals 5%.
Oh, okay. 5%. I love it. And you can even go ahead.
And I would argue, I mean, not only for yourselves, if you don't own a home, et cetera, but also when working with your clients.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah.
Yes, and maybe you'll appreciate this, Sheena.
I will. I'm like gonna master.
Yes, back in the day when I was working primarily with buyers, and I would have people who'd say they wanted to buy a condo, but then maybe they couldn't afford the condos in their neck of the wood. And why do you want a condo? Well, that's what I can afford. I can't afford a single family or whatever. Well, I worked with a whole lot of people who bought owner-occupied 2 flats, 3 flats, or 4 flats. Like, for example, you can help me out here. You know, what's the what's the maximum loan amount on an FHA 4-flat? Like,
480 or 450, is it?
oh, I thought it was even higher,
Maybe.
maybe. But, well, whatever, conventionally, I think it's like 700 or something. Okay. But so if you buy,
Oh yeah, it's 500.
you know, but let's even keep it simple. Let's say someone wants to buy a $300,000 2-flat. Okay. An owner occupied 2-flat, you can buy with 5% down any day of the week, correct?
Yes.
So 5% down, and I'm going to ignore closing costs and all that stuff just to keep numbers simple. 5% down on $300,000 is $15,000. Okay. The mortgage payment on that is, call it, it's not even going to be $1,200 plus maybe 300, call it 400 in taxes. You're going to have PMI if it's 200. And for simplicity, let's say $200 of insurance. So you might have a mortgage payment that's $200 or $2,000 a month. Okay. I would have, you know, you live in that property, your mortgage payment's going to be $2,000 a month. If you have a property where you might be able to rent the other apartment for $1,000 a month, then to live there, you're paying $1,000 a month, which is the fair market rent. So you're able to own the place for the same monthly payment that you would have to pay to rent it. Now, you know, fast forward 5 years. 5 years from now, if that 2-flat has appreciated by, call it 2% a year, then that's 10%. It'd actually be a little bit more with compounding, but you know, 5 years from now, if it's worth 10% more, it's worth $330,000. You're owner occupying, you could potentially refinance it. You only owe $285,000 on it. With principal pay down, you're going to have 20% equity in it. So let's see, 66. Yeah. So, I mean, you can refinance it. You can eliminate the private mortgage insurance. Yeah. Your mortgage payment ostensibly could be in that $1,800. It may still, let's say it's still in that $2,000 because taxes and insurance may have gone up. So you're still paying a $2,000 a month payment, but you can now move on and buy a new property for yourself. The two tenants are going to pay, now rents have probably gone up. They're no longer $1,000 a month. They're probably $1,100 or $1,200 a month 5 years down the road. So you're collecting $2,200 or $2,400 a month. So you have the extra cash flow to cover miscellaneous expenses, et cetera. Not to mention the fact that you've had tax benefits from having an investment property all along. But let's just go back to that scenario. If it's appreciated by 10% over 5 years and it's worth $330, you had a mortgage of $285. So your so $45,000 is your equity in the property. Your original investment was only 5% or $15,000. So 5 years later, your net equity in the property has actually tripled, while the property only and see that's even greater leverage. You know, that's why I said you were an evil lender when you required 20% down. But you're a wonderful lender if it's owner occupied and I only have to put 5% down. You know, because then my $15,000 investment 5 years down the road is worth $45,000. So in 5 years, you've tripled your money. So that's like a 50 to 60% a year appreciation rate. You know, that's better than any stock market or anything else.
Oh, I love it. I have a client that's going to appreciate this. Thank you, Tom.
And to put real hard numbers to it, I mean, that I still call it my home run investment, was before I got into real estate selling it, I bought a 4-flat in Wicker Park. And believe it or not, in 1987, Wicker Park was a fringe neighborhood that some people thought where it was going to be appreciating, and some people said, oh, they've been saying that about that area for the last 10 years. But they were asking $75,000 for a brick 4-unit. It was being sold by a divorcing couple. She was a real estate agent. He had been kicked out of their house 1 block away, and he was living in the basement apartment, because this building had actually been built as a 6-unit, but the garden level, which was totally above grade with 9-foot ceilings, had really kind of been bombed out. He had Miss Piggy sheets covering the windows as curtains. He had a bed, a stove, and a fridge, and that was it. So I wrote a contract we agreed on a price of $73,000. Now, all the apartments were heated by a floor model space heater, you know, just gravity heat that was located in one room. They had fuses for electric. 2 of the apartments only had 2 circuits. 1 of the apartments had 3, and 1 of them had 4. Our contract was for $73,000, but we wrote the contract as $83,000 with a $10,000 rehab credit at closing. I know, Sheena, you're going to be like, what? Fully disclosed on the front page of the contract. And I went to the bank and they had the contract. We didn't hide that disclosure. I was buying it owner occupied with 10% down. So the contract face was $83,000. So I needed $8,300 for my 10% down payment. My closing costs were about $4,000. So I needed to be able to show the mortgage broker $12,300, which I had to be able to bring to closing, which between earnest money and my cashier's check at closing, I had my $12,300. We signed all the documents. And then as the title agent, this petite young gal looked and said, Mr. Brandt, how would you like that $10,000 check made payable? Or she said, how would you like the check made payable? I said, excuse me? And she said, the $10,000 check, how would you like that made payable? At which point my real estate broker started coughing and put her head under the table into her purse. This seller real estate agent and her husband's eyes bugged out. And thank God my attorney on my left squeezed my arm, and I looked at him and he said, Tom, you do want your middle initial L, correct? Because that day, some of the documents had my middle initial and some didn't. And we had spent some time making sure that they were all consistent. And I looked at him in dismay, afraid to say anything. And I just said, that's how I always sign my name, Jack. I was 26 years old, by the way. And he just squeezed my arm and he said, that'll be Thomas L. Brandt. And she said, okay, I'll be right back. And she left and they were like, they're giving you that $10,000, blah, 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 blah. And my attorney was like, shh, shh, shh. And I said, Jack, what about that form I signed that said, if there's any mistakes, I agree to like correct it? Well, I have to And he said, Tom, if they give you that $10,000 check and we get out of this office with it, go straight to your bank and deposit it. If they call or email, or there wasn't email back then, if they call or send you a letter asking you to return it, contact me first. He said, that is not a minuscule issue. That is a major factor here. You do not have to return that money. So we just held our breath for about 5 minutes. She came back in with commission check for you, commission check for you, attorney's fees for you. Mr. Brandt, here's your check. Could you just sign the carbon copy? Sure enough, gave it to her, and we couldn't get out of there fast enough. So I bought that brick 4 flat, and at the end of the closing day, I was out of pocket $2,300. I was collecting 4 rents. It was owner occupied purchase, but all 4 units were occupied by tenants. They were paying $225 or $200 a month. So I was collecting $875 a month. And my interest, my mortgage was $675, including taxes and insurance. So I had $200 a month cash flow and $10,000 in my pocket. And about the bank they didn't care, And it was a $10,000 rehab credit for the upgrading of the heating and electrical systems. Verbatim, what was on there. Nowadays you could never get away with that, obviously. They didn't care. They didn't ask me if I ever did it. I was planning on doing it. I made the stupid 26-year-old mistake of telling 3 different electrical contractors and 3 different heating contractors that I had $10,000 rehab money available to do these projects. And then I was really frustrated because each one of those 6 contractors virtually wanted to use all my money, and I wanted to do both projects with it. So, and then my clever real estate agent called me 6 months later and said, you haven't moved into Julian, have you? And I said, no one's moved out. I plan to, but no one's moved. And, I don't know that I want to kick them out. And she said, you put on a suit and tie and go to work every day. And I don't think you know how dirty and disgusting, because my plan was live in one unit, renovate it, rent it out for a higher rent, move into another apartment, renovate it. So I thought, I pictured myself moving from apartment to apartment as I renovated each one and increased the rents, et cetera, et cetera. She's like, you don't know what it's like to do renovation, what dust and dirt's going to get into everything. You're better off going downtown, making that money, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, well, okay. So why are you calling me? Well, there's a 2 flat that just came on the market a block away. I used that $10,000 as a down payment on 1643 Julian, which was, and I said, oh, well, how much is it? She said $98,500. And I said, what? Every book I've read on real estate said buy the cheapest property in the best neighborhood, not the most expensive property in a marginal neighborhood. I said, I just paid $73,500 for 4 units. Why would I buy a 2 flat for $98,500? And she said, shut up. Sometimes it pays to own the preeminent home in the neighborhood. I'm like, what? Well, it was a 3 flat, and the architect and his wife had duplex 2 units and had 1 rental. I wrote the contract saying I was going to put 20% down as an owner occupant. And I just reflected a higher value on my application for the 4 flat. It probably had appreciated. But first I checked with the loan officer to make sure that I could get the new mortgage with only 10% down. Because I said, I'm writing a contract, because there was another offer already on it. And I said, I'm writing an offer for 20% down, but I want to make sure that I qualify for the mortgage with 10% down. And every which way to Sunday, and she put it in writing that I'd get it. So I bumped out the other offer. I paid full price for it. And then another year down the road, after I had owned it for about a a year and a half, I refinanced the 4 flat, got rid of my PMI because I had more than 20% equity. I actually pulled cash out and I did wall mounted furnaces, which is like a space heater. The only difference between a wall mounted furnace and a wall mounted space heater is that a wall mounted furnace has a thermostat as opposed to just a knob that controls the wall blowing or the air blowing into a room. So we did that. I did that. Every couple of years, I refinanced, I pulled some cash out, I put on a new rubber roof, I tuck pointed the whole thing, et cetera, et cetera. And after 14 years, so in 2001, going back to that original story with Gary Keller and the masterminds and big picture and how do you get passive income of $1 million, et cetera. And part of that goal was this property had a ton of equity. So in 2001, in part urged by those masterminds, et cetera, we decided we would sell that. But first, the one thing that we hadn't done yet, we actually invested $12,000 for brand new windows because the thing still had the floor model space heaters or the wall mounted furnaces, sorry. The garden unit we had renovated and we put in forced air furnace and central air. So I was now selling it as a 5 unit. But that last piece that we did in the winter of 2001 was we put in all brand new thermopane windows for $12,000 or $14,000 because then it looked beautiful. It looked beautiful on the outside. We had some solid tenants. Everyone was paying their rent. The numbers made sense, and we listed it for $450,000. And I got 8 offers. 2 of which were investors who came to me directly. I can't say that it was dual agency because you can't dual agent your own property. So they had to sign a document that said they agreed to have no representation. And it sold for $460,000. And I did a 1031 Starker exchange, tax deferred exchange. At the closing, that $2,300 investment 14 years before, my 1031 account at Chicago Title had $296,000 in it. So 100 times what I had invested 14 years before. And we used that 296 and we went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I bought a 12 unit for 625, a 4 unit for 179, and an 8 unit for 350. So, and as I said, that 8 unit, we flipped into another 8 unit because it turned out the agent I used up there didn't know or didn't let me know that the neighborhood of the 8 unit was more of a drug dealing kind of area. So 6 months later, I flipped it for 400 I was able to cover what I had spent on it and his commission. And we bought a different 8 unit. And in 2004, we had an unsolicited offer on our 8 unit from a realtor who had a 1031 buyer. We sold the 8 unit and I in turn bought a 10 unit and for $575. So we still have the 10 unit and the 12 unit and the 4 unit. So, and I just turned down a verbal offer from a realtor who supposedly had an investor who who made a verbal offer of $1,710,000 for the 12 and the 10. And we owe under $700,000 on that mortgage. So, I mean, there's $1 million of equity in just that property. And it all stems from $2,300, but better yet, the 4 flat 2 of the units have been vacant for 5 years, but the other 2 units have paid the mortgage. And I'm doing a gut renovation to those 2 units. That should be done probably by the end of March. And I will be, right now we only have like a $75,000 mortgage on that property. I'll probably refinance it when we're done for 150 and then pay that off within 5 years. And that 4 unit alone will be generating, like as of April or May, when we get new tenants in there, we'll have like 15 and 18, we'll have like $3,300 a month rent. The 2 apartments in the front, because I didn't want those tenants leaving, they're like $200 to $300 a month under market because they're big 3-bedroom apartments. They've been there for 4 years. We wanted them to stay because the back ones were empty. But the fair market value of those 4 rentals is probably $3,700 to $3,800 a month. And our taxes are like $400 a month, and the insurance is about $150. So, I mean, there will be $3,000 a month available to pay, pay down the mortgage. So we should have it paid off in 5 years, and then just that little 4-flat alone becomes a $3,000 a month passive income stream for us. So, without regular 401ks and all that other stuff, part of my big goals back in the day, when we also decided, we weren't going to sell and do multiple purchases from our other properties, et cetera. There were times in 2008, 9, 10, 11 when the market was really rough, and every now and then, and we were leveraged with, credit card debt and mortgages and this, that, and my wife, Katie, is like, maybe we should sell one of the buildings. And I said, no, it's our retirement, and that is still the goal that, in about 5 years, when I'm 65, we'll probably have $10,000 a month passive cash flow coming out of those buildings from $2,300 when I was 26 years old. So, and there are lots of other folks out there who, I mean, you don't have to go that big, but again, the tax laws with the deferred exchange, and I don't think they'll change. And then the other thing is, if my wife and I die tomorrow in a car crash, our kids inherit those buildings at the stepped up basis. So, they could sell them the day after and not owe any taxes on it. So the other beautiful thing about real estate is an investment. Not part of goal setting, but, or maybe it is. Can you tell the class I really would enjoy teaching? I don't know if there is one on investments, but any other questions or anything anybody have? No.
I just want to say thanks for sharing, Tom. That was amazing. And yes, very inspiring goal setting.
Yeah.
That was very good, Tom. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
Definitely did matter, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Remember, I still like Steve Slater, big, hairy, audacious goals, So, all right. And be kind to yourselves. All right.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mask back on.
Thanks, Tom.
Take
Have
care.
a great day, everyone.
Sure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.